All right, everyone. So I think we gave the latecomers enough time to join our webinar. Without further ado, the webinar is as titled Unlock the UK Market. Just a little bit of a backstory. As you all know, Wabel is always not just looking for business partners and for partners to help us increase the output of our events, but we're also always eager to provide our own customers with the best knowledge and the best information in the market. That's why we partner up with ADN branding, and as shared through our multiple bulk emails, ADN branding are world renowned for helping brands reach their maximum potential. Of course, I'll leave the floor to Raheen and Sunny to introduce ADN much more and lead our webinar. Go ahead, guys.
Hey, thanks everyone. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you to the Wabel team for putting this webinar together today. I hope everybody is well and are having a good day today. So, as the title suggests, we are here to talk about how to unlock the UK market. As Ahmed has said, we are ADN International. Our role is to help brands to navigate, understand, and unlock international markets that they're looking to enter. How do we do this? Well, primarily we're kind of guided by data, but it's really powered by relationships and getting the most out of the contacts and network that we have available to ensure that the brands that we partner with find the optimum solution to their international aspirations. I'm joined this afternoon by Sunny Samra, who heads up our UK operation, and Sunny will be obviously just chiming in as necessary through the presentation. So, Ahmed, without further ado, if you can kindly load the deck, that would be great.
Definitely. Just give me 1 second.
No worries. Okay, thank you for that. As I've said, today's presentation is really just some insights into some of the key kind of factors that need to be considered prior to entering the UK market. I guess a lot of this content applies to any market consideration, but our particular focus for this particular presentation is the UK market. Next slide, please. Okay, so an overview then of the UK FMCG market. So in the UK FMCG market, food and beverages are the largest segment with an estimated annual value of just around 105 billion GBP. And according to the Department of Industry and Trade, this is even larger than the aerospace and automotive industries combined. So it's a pretty big chunk of the overall market. Inflation drove increased spending, technological advances such as online shopping, and e-commerce have also helped fuel growth within this particular sector. The market is continuing to grow, despite showing signs of a decrease of a number of buyers. Inflationary pressures and technological advances are driving increased spending from existing customers. However, this allows businesses to reap the benefits of higher sales revenue. LSE thinks that this market share will increase to 12% by 2025 for food and beverages, which will be almost double what it currently is. The other thing I just wanted to touch on was the market is very fragmented. You've got a lot of kind of mainstream and mainline retailers, as you can see on the right there. But then there are also some aggressive value brands and value retailers that are coming into the picture and are creating a meaningful impact in the market landscape. Next slide, please. So what's going on in the UK now? There's been a definite shift in buying behavior. So during the pandemic, a lot of consumers had to change their buying behavior. Some of that is because of availability in stores, with the lack of products being available, and that really forced consumers to switch into supermarket own brand. And then the other big factor in shifting buying behavior has been on price. Inflation, which is something that I think all markets are struggling with right now. It went up in 2021 and 2022. It was 11.1, its highest level since 1981. And food price inflation has also been especially high as well, reaching 19.2% in March 23, its highest annual rate for 45 years. Inflation has, however, fallen recently, reaching to 3.2% in March of this year, its lowest level in over 2 years. And food price inflation, thankfully, also fell to around 4% in March. Although inflation is still very much front and center in terms of considerations of the market. The other key kind of factor, which I touched on my previous slide, is that the power of the discounters. So the current climate in the UK has really played into the hands of discount retailers like Aldi and Lidl. They're continuing to gain market share, and I'll touch on that in future slides. But nearly 40% of consumers have tried own branded products since COVID-19. And as I said, much of that switching behavior was because of availability issues and price. Next slide, please. So this is the current kind of status, or the sort of snapshot of the UK grocery market. Since 2013, the market share of the big four, as we traditionally call them, Tesco, Asda, Sainsbury's and Morrisons, have fallen from 77% in 2011 to 65% in 2023. This decline was accompanied by the rapid rise of lower cost, no frill competitors like Lidl and Aldi. And in 2011, Lidl and Aldi only had 5%, whereas in 2023 that reached over 18%. In fact, Aldi have now overtaken Morrisons in its share of the grocery market, and is now officially the fourth biggest grocer in the market. This has again been underpinned by the result of the cost of living crisis, and it's shown that consumers are turning to people like Aldi and Lidl to meet their daily shopping needs. Also, we've noticed that consumers are making more frequent but smaller value shopping trips. So preferences shifted towards single item purchases rather than really big weekly shops. And the trend of online purchasing is unabating. So these guys have got access to a number of online platforms now, that they're using, and it's an important aspect to consider when entering the UK market. Next slide, please. So what does this mean really for market entry? We captured a recent survey carried out by McKinsey, and this was focused on asking CEOs on what their thoughts were of the UK market currently. The bigger kind of words in red are their key concerns, which is quite an interesting take. So CEOs think that the market for the UK is still quite challenging and complicated. It's still very price focused. Lost the screen, sorry. Still quite price focused. There's still a lot of competition in the market. Inflation is always there, and there's a lot of change and uncertainty, coupled with other issues such as ESG and sustainability, purchasing power of consumers. There is some stagnation in certain channels, and certain channels are also seeing declining volumes. However, some CEOs feel that the market is recovering, even though it's still dynamic and volatile. Next slide, please. So from a brand's perspective, what are your key considerations really for entering the UK? So any new entrant into the UK market must have a full brand support strategy in place ahead of market entry. So just having a good product is no longer really enough to warrant a buyer's attention. You've got to think really here about value for money, your price points. Does your product have a point of difference and any USPs? Are you prepared to make promotional and ongoing marketing investment? What are the functional benefits of your product that you're proposing? And then are you prepared to participate in online activity to reach your consumer directly? How you communicate with your consumers is critical. A lot of brands now spend a lot of their budget on targeted consumer insight. And buyers really, really love database-backed propositions. What we're saying here is that any kind of proposition that we make to a buyer or that you make to a buyer must have category data and category insights loaded into it so that the buyer can see what your rationale is for pitching for these products in the first place. Any brands that come into the market that have got a strong NPD strategy will also have an edge. And that is a great way of creating excitement with buyers in particular. Buyers are always looking for NPD, particularly any way of increasing their category totals and their category footprint. So and a lot of brands that focus on core products, but having a fresh, unique offering may be the difference between getting a listing and not. So brands that have got a localized or lifestyle inspiration or a new recipe can find success here. And then another consideration which we've put down is digital marketing. Having an e-commerce budget is crucial in today's FMCG landscape. Social media, digital display, groceryretailer.com, so tesco.com or asda.com, plugging into their click and collect websites. Amazon is growing its food business all the time, and it has and reporting increasing sales regularly. And you know, your activation plans, you really have to split them into sort of .com retail media, digital media with measurable sales activities, in-store promotions, and also mobile platform promotions. Next slide, please. So I just touched on brands. What's the outlook really for private label? So why private label? So for any private label product, what's the reference national brand from a benchmarking perspective? what are you trying to achieve by going into private labeling? And more importantly, it's about understanding what the buyer is looking to do to try and create a private label strategy. Is it a market leading product or category? Is it a product that resonates with customers? What distinct consumer needs does it meet? Is the value proposition differentiated from that of national brands? And then communication, marketing, and packaging. So leading retailers have recently been using really cost-effective channels to communicate the story behind their own in-store brands. There are some examples of Tesco Finest, Asda, Extra Special, one of Aldi's hundreds of private label brands. It's their version of the Airwick air freshener, which they've called Pure Wick. How do they source the ingredients for these products? What do they do to market them? So very often supermarkets will throw their full weight of internal marketing. They'll put their digital platforms. They'll always prioritize their own brands. Packaging also is becoming more and more important for anyone conveying a private labels proposition. So in the past, private label packaging tended to resemble the look and feel of national branded equivalents. This resonates really strongly with consumers. Again, on a private label, what value proposition are you trying to achieve, and how do you differentiate that proposition from national brands? Next slide, please. So is private label on the rise? Well, certainly post-COVID, private label activity has increased, not only in the UK, but everywhere generally. How long this trend lasts for is anyone's guess. The chart on the right here just shows the types of products and categories that are achieving low to high levels of penetration. And also at the bottom, you can see low to high customer purchase frequency. So you can see categories like meat, fresh produce, dairy, frozen produce, and canned goods are very much in the high private label penetration and high consumer purchase frequency. And they're really the areas that are being targeted by supermarkets to get after in their own brands. It's not exclusive, and there are opportunities in other categories as well. So for example, snacking has a relatively low private label penetration, but a high consumer purchase frequency. So this suggests an opportunity to enter private label opportunities with snacking to try and drive that penetration. Traditionally, health and beauty, pet foods, and household, because of the complexity, the regulation, and the difficulty in producing these products, and because of their specialist nature, have tended to be dominated by brands. Having said that, Aldi, Lidl have got very strong private label offerings in health and beauty and cosmetics, as we've seen. However, those products are manufactured in the main by brands, by manufacturers that already make brands or supply them with brands, and work on them on a partnership basis to create a private label opportunity as well. So from a manufacturing point of view, the opportunity isn't as investment hungry as branded supply. Okay, so you don't have to sink so much upfront investment into entering the market. In addition to that, retailers will often have lower route to market costs, which will be passed on to their suppliers. But there is a catch, of course, and that is that they will demand a very competitive price. Next slide, please. So that's really just a general overview of what's going on in the UK. What I wanted to touch on next was just some general market entry considerations. So what you need to think about before and after you enter the market. Okay, next slide. So general considerations for market entry. Sunny, do you want to just run through this one?
Yeah, I'll run through this one. So when we're looking at the general considerations for market entry, we kind of categorize that into 4 areas. So where to play and how to win. So different markets present different opportunities and challenges. This could be down to the actual channel that we're looking to enter for that specific brand. There'll be different asks from that channel with regards to the investments that need to be made, the criteria that they'll actually judge a brand or a manufacturer on. So, you know, if we're looking at, for example, the retail channel, and we look at specifically the top 4 retailers within the UK, they're quite rigorous with their demands and what they'd ask for from a brand and a supplier looking to enter their retail base, and the proposals and everything that we put together to enter those that retail channel will have to be quite complex and meeting their kind of rigorous viewpoints. However, there's other areas like the wholesale and food service channels, which are a lot more lenient with regards to the requirements needed to access their bases. Then we've got the market-specific challenges. So internal markets hold unique challenges, cultural, political, to technological, and regulatory. It's vital to understand and navigate these challenges that would otherwise present significant barriers to entry. So again, when we're looking at what Raheem touched upon with regards to sustainability, when we're looking at the different regulations that are going to be required for the brands to actually enter the UK market, we have to make sure from all perspectives with regards to packaging requirements on distribution, that all of these are met. Resources, internal management. So international trading will need dedicated people and experience in managing across cultures and specific ways of working for each market, and how to grow after initial supply. So once you've commenced supply, how do you sustain and grow your business? So putting together a full-on growth plan for each channel, which will require different approaches, again, depending on the channel that you look to go for. So again, when we're looking at that top retail channel, it's about creating robust JVPs in partnership with the specific retailer that you're working with, to create a strong growth plan, that generates through MPD, that generates through a full promotional plan, and using a strong marketing plan as well. Next slide, please.
Thank you. Next slide. And again. So I'll take, so really preparation is vital to understanding any kind of market. So we've touched already on the need to prepare and be ready to enter. So typically you need to use Nielsen, Euromonitor, and really understand what's going on within your category, and try and extract meaningful data to support your claim to entering the market. You'll also understand by looking at the data what the potential weighted distribution opportunities are. And then finally, communicating with buyers in their language. So preparing and sending relevant product information and getting it right first time is critical. Buyers in the UK are notoriously difficult to work with. They are very, very demanding, and they have a limited amount of time. So it's very, very important to understand that you must prepare, we must present to them what they're looking for in a really succinct and efficient way. And I've got some examples of some category insights on the next few slides. Next slide. So this slide is again an example of what kind of work we do for clients, by showing where the opportunities lie for a particular product within a category. How do we indicate that it's on a positive trajectory, and how do we prove to the buyer that the category is set to grow? Next slide. And again, this is a different product. Again, we're showing a growth plan for this particular product. to demonstrate to the buyer that what we're talking about and what we're proposing isn't a declining category, it's in growth. Next slide. And again, that's another example. Next slide. We then distilled some of the data that we take. We then create our own kind of meaningful take on it to show what the split in any category is, what the potential run rate will be if it's provided and if it's supplied, and if it achieves a sensible rate of sale in a sensible point of distribution scale. Next slide. And then really the market research has to be underpinned by doing, looking at your channels, your gap analysis within the channels. Who are your competitors, and what are their prices like? What are the regulatory and compliance issues and challenging? Are there specific ingredients that can and can't be imported into the market? What do the specifications look like for particular channels and categories of product? Are there government guidelines in place? For example, in the UK, you may have heard a lot about HFSS, higher fat, sugar and salt. This is one of many kind of regulatory guidelines now that brands and retailers are grappling with to ensure that they're compliant with what's going on in the market. And then finally, are there any trade and tariff barriers? Will your product incur any kind of duty? And if so, you need to be aware of that before you even you start having conversations with the buyers. And again, next slide. There's some.
Yeah, just touching on that last slide, Raheen, with regard to HFSS, the other side that is kind of permanent to understand is if your products don't match those guidelines and aren't HFSS compliant, then when it comes to actually building a promotional plan with these retailers, on any feature space that they have outside of their current shelves, you will not be able to promote. So it's that full understanding of where those barriers are for the brand before entering the market, because it will stop. If you don't meet some of those compliances, it will limit the opportunity that you have and the space you'll be able to generate when going into these retail channels.
Absolutely. Next slide. So this is an example of where we've positioned a brand in the red square. So this is a brand that we're proposing to take into a particular market. What we've done is we've taken all the competitors in the same space. We've taken the competitor brands, and then we've taken a snapshot of their pricing on shelf. And the objective of this is to try and create a defensible price position on shelf. And that enables us to basically say that the brand that we're targeting in the red square can actually compete in the space that it wants to, and that we've got a really clear strategy in place for it. Next slide. Okay, so the other aspects of route to market. So value chains are the bane of our lives, and we work with them all day long. Value chains are so important in understanding whether you're ready or not to enter a particular market. Different markets have different requirements. Different retailers and different channels have their own specific value chain formats, and you've got to have them down by SKU and be channel specific. The other key thing with value chains is that you don't often get a chance to revisit the value chain once you've submitted it to the buyer. So once you've kind of given the buyer your pricing and commercial information, and you've loaded what you think is going to be needed by way of support, etc., within that, the buyer will be very reluctant to make any changes to the value chain you initially propose, which is why you've got to have it absolutely right, because a mistake in your value chain could cost you margin. Secondly, you need to have a clear line of sight on your listing costs and other investments. Again, that's allied to the value chain. And then what is your route to market strategy for each specific channel? So when you're looking at the market, are you entering it under private label or as your brand? Or are you looking at multiples, i.e. mainline retail, the big four, etc.? Or are you looking at the wholesale channels? Are you looking at food service? Are you looking at independent stores and convenience stores? Yeah. And you've got to be clear before you enter the market on exactly where you want to enter and how you plan to do that. And there's some examples coming up now of route to market planning. Next slide. So there are two wildly different value chains here. Both are equally as valid, but you can see things like, you know, whether if you're supplying a distributor, how much you need to load in for A&P, what the retailer margins are going to be. In the case of the United Arab Emirates, they have a peculiarity where they have a retailer front margin and a retailer back margin, and then there's tax implications as well. And then there's another example there of a value chain below, where again the objective of the value chain is to achieve is to get to a retail sales price starting from your supply price, but the journey between the two is critical in getting right. Next slide, please. So some general kind of considerations. So when you're having conversations with the buyers with any channel, what is your listing and distribution plan? In order to list your products, buyers are going to have to delist somebody else. That's the reality. So if you're coming in as a new entrant into the market, the reality is that you'll be taking somebody else's space. And as I've written there, shelves aren't elastic. Okay. It's important that you identify poor performing SKUs within the particular channel's category in order to make your case. Very often you'll see a long list of product and very often there's a tail of low performing or low selling lines. And they're typically the ones that you target to take space away from. Secondly, how many points of distribution are you looking for and how are you going to justify this? And again, you need a clear plan to demonstrate this to the decision makers. Are you offering a marketing plan? Is it annualized? This is very much the norm now, not just for the big retailers, but for the lower tier retailers as well. Everybody wants investment for marketing. It's a key feature now in not only the UK market, but in many other international markets. So an annual promotion calendar will usually include the frequency and the depth of promotions that you're willing to fund over the year, as well as any other direct investments you're willing to make to the retailer. It's not, please don't see annual promotions and investments as a sweetener for the deal. It's a critical part of the listing process. And then you've got to, again, think about if you're a new product and you've got some innovation, how are you going to get consumer trial? How are you going to drive that? All the retailers, not just in the UK, but everywhere, offer sampling opportunities, tasting campaigns. You know, it's a really, really effective way to target and build your new consumer base. A lot of brands that we work with will do sampling campaigns in addition to heavily discounted promotion on shelf, so that once they've sampled the products, it will drive trial, and they'll be much more willing to actually pick the product up off the shelf. Finally, social media and digital plan. This is so important in today's retail landscape. All brands really have got to be prepared to put some investment behind this. In the past, social media wasn't very big, but now, as we all know, it's huge. Influencers can make the difference between success or failure. Appointing and engaging with the right influencers can make a massive difference. The demographic of your consumer base, depending on who you're targeting, is also going to be pointing to how technologically savvy they are. So if you're anything like my children, who are all adults, they live their lives on their mobile phones now, and I'm sure many other people do too. mobile marketing is probably one of the most effective and cost-effective strategies that any brand can employ today. Next slide. So in summary, sorry, next slide. What we're saying today is checking your commercial proposal to ensure that you have a defensible value chain. Have you fully priced it and fully costed it? How do you compare against your competition? Have you looked at who's out there and on the shelf at the moment? If you haven't reviewed the UK market to see what's going on, you need to, or any other market before you enter it. Have you discussed minimum order quantities? Can you meet their requirements or satisfy, or can they satisfy your minimum requirements? Is duty applicable? What are the terms of supply going to be? So what kind of a supply contract are you likely to get? You know, notoriously big retailers will often give you 60 days, 90 days payment terms. Can you afford to work with that? Have you got your logistics and supply chain organized? Have you got the route to market in terms of getting product from your factory, wherever it is, onto the shelf effectively and efficiently? And can you maintain that logistics and supply chain? Because Sonny, if I'm not mistaken, Tesco, for example, have an availability requirement of 98.5%.
98.5%, yes, correct.
So that what that means is that, you know, they expect you to supply on time and in full 98.5% of the time. And if you don't, there'll be penalties and repercussions. So again, checking these things before you enter is vital. Have you checked the regulatory and compliance challenges? You know, can you legally import your products or export your products into the market you want to? We're having lots and lots of issues with brands that are going into some Asian markets currently where they don't meet the regulatory requirements. It's better to know beforehand rather than invest an awful lot of money in entering the market and then realizing that your product will be rejected at port. What's the timeline for ongoing communication with your partners? Have you got a plan in place? And then, are there any contractual challenges that you face in a potential legal agreement with entering the market? And then finally, touching on the earlier point, can you manage ongoing supply? Next slide. So just in summary, and this is the last slide, guys. So next slide, please. So really, ADN, we exist to act as your representative. We are your interface, if you like, between yourselves and your partners. And what we look to do is try and fill any resource gaps that you might have in your own organization, where you might not have an export team. You may not have the relevant people that have got the relevant skills and experience or capability. And what we do is we ensure that your objectives are met. And if your objectives are unrealistic, or the market is not ready for you, or you're not ready for the market, or there's an obstacle, we'll point that out to you before you enter the market, so that you save yourself a lot of time and heartache. So that really concludes our sort of summary and insight into the UK market. I hope that you found the presentation useful. I'm going to hand back to Ahmed now.